Joining us. This is the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting for 1 p.m. Monday, August 4th. We do have a little bit of different room configuration, so there's 2 seats instead of it was going out to the corner with 2 tables. The idea is just that it kind of rounds out the video, so somebody can't hide in the corner there. So, but please just feel comfortable to step up when we're doing that. At this time for citizen input, is there anyone with any items that are not on the agenda? Went online. The raised hand. Okay. So yeah, 2025. Well, any other updates? We just finished up the county fair, had a great community breakfast, Black Group breakfast Sunday morning, but county breakfast Saturday morning also. So some real good times out county fair. Crazy weather at the end of the day yesterday. Any other thoughts or want to share?
I believe the gross for the 4-H and FFA auction, hopefully will be way over 1.8 million. So, you know, I heard a lot of amazing members of our community supporting the youth, and they worked so hard. It was so great. My cute story for the day is my neighbor Virginia. It was her first lamb ever. She named me Tsunami quite a few months ago.
Oh.
Yeah, she worked at my house one day so she could out buy him, and he took off in the ring. And she was holding on the whole time. But Tsunami, yeah, he lived up to his billing, and she ended up getting like double the price. She got $28 a pound. So, you know, nothing like being embarrassed, but getting double the funding. Yeah, so the auctioneer was great.
Well, thanks, Bill. When you mentioned you were out there at the auction spotter for many hours, hopefully they give you a break.
It was a busy day.
Yeah, good. But a lot of money flowing. Thanks for the businesses that participate. Congratulations to all the kids that were involved also. Any other thoughts? Okay, so first item is 2025 legislative session review, Northwest Policy Advocates. Thank you very much for joining us.
The assistant Jim Patterson here.
Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager for the county.
Introducing you, but yeah. there we go.
I'll just let Doug take it from here. I'm gonna share his PowerPoint though real quick,
Gonna poke me if I get off
if I
track.
can do
Well,
this.
and yeah, department heads and everybody else, I mean, this is our kind of round table for what we saw. I know Chris is here for the transportation, so, and you know, Commissioner Chang's at the OTC, so whatever we can get out there today, share amongst ourselves.
And we have less support service here from health services too, to give additional information, so.
There may be, yeah, anybody else, department heads that.
Yep.
Great, I will run through this hopefully fairly quickly, although nothing legislative is quick. So just for the record, Doug Riggs on behalf of the county, happy to be here today. Happy to have survived the session, and it was quite a session. I guess as you can see, the building is still under construction and behind schedule again. So they were supposed to be done by the end of August, so the building would be fully occupiable by the beginning of September, but the basement concourse level is still not done. And so it is behind schedule, and they're hoping it'll be ready for February. But it has been I'll tell you, the building, it's a difficult place to work with no cafe, no coffee. So we have to steal coffee from the legislators' offices or borrow coffee. And then no place for really the public to sit. That's the problem. Everywhere, it's like an airport boarding lounge along the area rooms. And it really does make it quite a bit more difficult for the public to be engaged and involved, as well as those of us who are in the building every day. And all three of you are in the building quite a bit, so you well know that. So next
Let them be Randall for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, project management.
Yes, exactly. Just a few pictures that you can take a look at your leisure. I just pulled a few pictures from a variety of the things that you three all participated in. I'd say that is really important. I'd say, you know, at the end of the session, most of us were not optimistic given the revenue forecast. And a lot of my colleagues from other regions walked out of the building pretty disappointed with what happened. And we had disappointments as well, but as we'll get to in a few minutes, I think there were a lot of successes that the county saw. And I think there are 5 reasons, see if I can remember my 5 reasons, but 5 reasons for that. Number one is, as we've talked about since, you know, the initial presentation to the board way back when, 3 or 4 years ago, interim activities are the most important thing you could do. And you and the staff have been fantastic about engaging in the process in the interim. And I cannot tell you how valuable that is. So bringing legislators over here, like for instance, when Kate Leader came over and was able to meet with the county staff and talk about deflection and talk with the stakeholders, meet with the commissioners, they remember that. And so when something comes up through the Ways and Means Committee and they say, Deschutes County, we have faith that we can give money to Deschutes County because we've seen examples of how they've spent money in the past. So commissioner engagement, staff engagement, both at the local level with our delegation and also at the statewide level. So we don't just work with our local delegation, we work with all the state legislators. I think that's key. The connections that you all have through your various activities are really important. The third thing I'd say is I emphasize the staff involvement. The staff are involved in a lot of the AOC subcommittee groups and with the things like AOC, MHP, public health organizations. That's very helpful. We're part of a team with other counties, with other municipalities, and that really leads to it. And I guess I've compressed one of those, so I not only have 4 things to say, but the 4th thing is I'd say we were successful because of our delegation. We, on a bipartisan basis, had very engaged, very helpful legislators representing us in Central Oregon. They were a delight to work with, and they had a lot of muscle at the end of the day. And they got things done. So you'll see that reflected. But it's just a few of the things. I will point out the snow picture. Doesn't snow often in Salem, but they actually did not cancel meetings. I think Holly drove all the way over there in the middle of a snowstorm, and we all got to the building at 7:30 only to find out that they canceled the meetings 5 minutes or 10 minutes before they were set to start. A lot of people drove a long way. So, yeah. Next slide. Session overview. I don't remember if this was the most bills ever. I suspect it wasn't, but it certainly seemed like the most bills ever. My guess is with the amendments, it was the most bills and amendments. I saw -59 amendments to bills, -38 amendments. So legislative council stayed busy. But as a percentage, fewer bills passed, and we'll get to some of that. Critical issues failed. I would say that the theme of this session was what they called current services level. Current services level basically means status quo. The Ways and Means at the very beginning of the session said we're going to stick with status quo. In my mind, that means stick with the things that a lot of cases aren't working. You're 45th or 48th or 50th in a lot of things, and the Ways and Means Committee made a decision. We're going to stick with the things that have gotten us to those low rankings, rather than a lot of the creative bills that committees and chairmen put together in the interim to reform things. So a lot of those reform bills did not pass. We'll get some of that. An example was a sustainable wildfire funding mechanism. They funded wildfire this session, but some of it's temporary. Transportation funding, they waited until the end of the session. We'll get to that in a little bit. That also failed. So going forward, I think the big question marks beyond where our revenue forecast goes, and we'll get a revenue forecast here in about 3 weeks. Beyond that, we've got some major question marks at the federal level. Are we going to see our enhanced Medicaid match cut by 10% from 90 to 80%? That's over $1 billion we could lose because we're funding undocumented individuals through Medicaid, even though we're using general fund dollars. So that's an outstanding question. The second is the hospital provider tax. We got a waiver to tax hospitals at 6.5%. The statute says you can do it at about 3%. So will the administration say, no, you can only tax up to what's statutorily allowed? And those 2 questions have to be resolved. Last thing, just from an overview perspective, as you all know, is that the governor has called a special session on August 29th. I've talked to several legislators this week. I think the universal belief is that there will be a session. There will be enough members coming in both in the House and the Senate to ensure quorums. I could be wrong on that, but even some of the people who are opposed to the last iteration of the bill believe that there will be a special session, and people vote yes or no, and we'll see where that goes. Critical issues.
So the health provider tax, when you say the 3% legislatively, is that ruling like by Oregon's court system amongst ourselves, or is that a federal designation, correct?
Yep, it's federal. Yeah, I mean the legislature had to give approval to the Oregon Health Authority to ask for the higher percentage, which was given to a number of states. But it'll be a decision by CMS and the Bureau of Primary Care as at the federal level as to whether or
Oh,
not
the federal's gonna make
the
this.
federal will make
I
the
was just
decision.
wondering who's making this.
Yeah, whether or not we're compliant with federal law.
Whether they're gonna cap us.
Yeah.
On this revenue
Yeah.
source.
And that actually, the loss of the Medicaid match would be, as I understand, about $1 billion biennium, but the reduction in the healthcare provider tax, if it goes back to 3%, and we can only be matched up to 3%, that is, I understand, over $4 to $4.5 billion in enhanced match through that mechanism. So that would be a very large reduction in the state budget.
But right now Oregon is 34% on Medicaid. And
It's a very high percentage.
yeah, it's one of the highest,
Yep.
yes. But our school funding is actually, we're 15th most. So even though our kids are testing at the bottom, the funding for the state program is, I think, number 15 in the nation,
Yep, it is a high percent.
Yeah.
But, yep.
15 or 14.
Just an overview slide. I stole this from someone else from Elpro. I'm not gonna take credit for it. I do graphics, but my graphical skills are probably not quite at this level. But you can see the number of House bills, Senate bills, the number of bills that went to the governor, 640 out of, well, this has 3,300 and then the proposed amendments. So we're talking close to 6,000 total pieces of legislation with amendments. Remember, a lot of the amendments are like gut and stuffs or 48-page replacements, or so an amendment in legislative parlance often is as difficult as a bill. So, that's about 10% of the total number of legislative pieces of drafting that pass. That's a pretty small number. Usually it's about 800 in a long session, over 800. So, and you can take a look. I mean, you can see the lots of testimony. So 17,000 people signed up and 102,000 pieces of testimonies. That's a lot. So next slide. So as I said, and I wanted to put this right up front, from a region, and I didn't throw in some of the things that Crick and Jefferson County benefited from in Wasco County, but as a region, we had a lot of successes funding important things. So just a few of them: Core 3, the Children's Psychiatric Facility, the Juniper Mitigation Water Restoration funding for COIC to help manage that, make sure it heads in the right direction. Money for monitoring. High Desert Museum and Mosaic got funding. The one change I'll point out this session versus previous couple sessions is the Ways and Means Committee did much less, and I'm going to fund an individual project, this project, that project, this project. Instead they had pots of money in certain cases, and the next 2 or 3 are kind of examples. So the behavioral health housing funding for residential funding, both adult and some children's funding, is a bucket that OHA will have to decide how to allocate. Housing infrastructure funding, instead of funding a lot of individual projects in housing infrastructure, they provided a small amount of funding to be run through the business development department with OHCS providing input. Industrial readiness bonds, which have always been a big issue for municipalities. And then one thing that changed kind of in the last couple of weeks was shelter funding, homeless shelter funding. Was very unclear, so kind of unclear from reading the bills, but we believe that it is actually $205 million in real money for the biennium. And then I threw the last one in because I know you all heard of it when you were at Warm Springs, and the Warm Springs are our partners, but they got $1.5 million to upgrade the museum, which I think is kind of cool. So other related priorities, and some of this is still a little unclear as far as the overall amount of money for county fairs and how it divides into pieces. But county fair issues were something that came up in the commission meetings a few times. There was money for county fairs, including a couple of specific county fairs. There is money for fire protection expenses. There is a new tax, which we'll get to in a moment, on oral nicotine products. And then there's, they largely funded wildfire. The bulk of it is through a SPA, or special purpose appropriation money, which is money that you give to the E-Board. And as expenses come in, the E-Board can meet and vote and allocate funding. So unlike last session where they got to the end of the firefighting season, they didn't have enough money in their budget to pay the contractors. This year they believe that that's sufficient to be able to pay their bills.
Doug, is that money that is allocated over to the board under that SPA general fund dollars or some other color of money?
Yeah, that's general fund dollars.
So,
Yeah, so it's readily available. It's not bonding money that would have to be.
but while, I mean, you know, one of the goals, at least for some people going into this session, was to make wildfire suppression less dependent on the general fund. That allocation basically means that we didn't accomplish.
Didn't happen, yeah, yeah. And there was a lot of drama around that and the holding back of the wildfire maps bill to try to break discussions loose. But honestly, from my discussion with both sides, I think there was bipartisan frustration each way about the situation. Clearly, we didn't get to where I don't be, so, yeah. And based on what I heard last week, we might not spend all the money that's been allocated. The fire season has been hot, especially over here, but at a statewide level, we might not have to spend everything that we allocated, which would mean some could be pulled over for next firefighting season too.
It's only the
Lot of
3rd of
small,
August.
lot of small fires, but we haven't had very many of the big ones yet.
It's only August 3rd.
Fingers crossed.
Please,
Yeah.
just don't say anything
Yeah.
yet or knock on wood.
Transportation, I could have 10 slides on this. Chris is sitting in the back and could have 4. Yeah, we could echo that. So, I mean, the transportation issue crashed and burned in the last day of the session. It was the last issue. And it was, there were negotiations until there weren't. And so there were negotiations on a bipartisan basis until very late, until within about 2 or 3 weeks left in the session. And then the negotiations, from my understanding, stopped. And then we all waited around, and then we saw a couple different iterations of what could be a large bill, and then there was a small bill, and then the governor showed up at the Capitol, and then they lost a couple Democrats, and they removed. I put the picture of Mark Meek here. You know, his district includes Clackamas County, and he was very unhappy with the mechanism and the way that tolling was being implemented in Clackamas County, as was the entire Clackamas County delegation on a bipartisan basis. And so he was opposed to the bill. Then he was taken off the committee. It was very dramatic. If you want to go back and watch the hearing, you can see some of the drama unfold. And several of his colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, showed up at the committee to support him. And in the next 2 days, they replaced him, and then they brought someone else on the committee, but they still didn't have the votes. They would have probably had the votes on the House side because they thought they'd unlocked one of the Republicans, but they did not have the votes on the Senate side. So the session ended. There.
Before you go on.
Well, there was cleanup language to continue the authority to be able for the department to toll. So what happened is in House Bill 2017, in 2017, the big package that included the Clackamas County projects, the Rose Quarter, and fully funded 217 and put $1 billion for the I-5 bridge. There was language that allowed the department to toll, but they would have had to come back to the legislature. In 2021, that language in an amendment that almost no one saw because the session was remote for everybody except for members of it. They changed that, the ODOT greater authority on tolling, and the legislature felt like it gave less tolling. This language extended that. This language that he's holding up extended that tolling language and made some technical changes. So it preserved the existing tolling authority that had been modified and changed in 2021. That's what he was upset about. So it wasn't language that said, here you're going to go toll something. It was language that preserved the ability of ODOT to propose tolls and enact tolls for certain projects, and that's what he objected. And I understand that has now been taken out of the bill that will come before the special session. So outstanding issues, and this is changing daily, and none of us actually seen the bill. We've seen talking points that, AOC has sent out talking points and others. But there's highway cost allocation study, there was a court decision on that determined that truckers were paying too much and passenger vehicles were paying too little, so that's an outstanding issue. There's the fact that there's no great streets or safe routes to schools money that has a lot of people upset about it. And then I'd say that the number one issue that has held this up and really preventing Republicans from getting on board is the governor's executive order issued in January on project labor agreements. Of course, some issues kind of that's kind of a statewide requirement. Republicans, I think, to get most of the swing Republicans in support of something, this is a change would have to be made, and I don't think that is going to be changed. So, and the last thing is, my personal view is that if they had come out with real solid accountability measures back in March, and then sat down and been able to work on things, that would have been advantageous versus waiting until the end of the session and putting a few small things into the bill that came out. I think there's still questions about, what's the structure of ODOT and who's managing business operations, who's doing contracting. Those are the questions I continue to hear from a bipartisan group of legislators.
Is there, a couple of years ago, there was charts going around about the debt associated with big projects that were bonded. I don't know, is that under ODOT itself, or was that other state bonds? Is that part of this conversation? The fact that for every dollar that goes into gas tax, X amount is already eaten up by debt maintenance. Did that ever come up?
That came up less this session, but that has been a talking point and a concern.
And that's a part of the that's a part of the mechanisms allocated towards debt. What we're talking about now is purely maintenance, and so it's not going to incur any debt of significance, and so that really
Yeah, so
has
it's just recurring dollars.
it's of the existing ODOT allocation. A significant portion is debt service. Based on all the House Bill 2017, the Jobs Transportation Act, before that, and bills going back decades now.
I just wonder if there's like
contributed to that.
Are we still ramping into that debt, or is it?
I mean,
I don't
every
know.
day gets us closer to the finish line.
Yeah, I know, to get out of it.
But the reality is we're maintenance, in this conversation, the conversation behind that is funding those big Portland area projects, right? So that would be more of a debt element that any future funding increase would, have to go towards as well.
It's important to understand that concern about debt service for large capital projects is HB 2017 heartburn. HB 2017 didn't allocate adequate investment for operations and maintenance. Promised legislators all sorts of bright, shiny, new capital construction projects in their districts to get them developed. And so overextended us in terms of capital investments. And people are so angry about those big capital projects at this point,
But they didn't get implemented.
Some of them couldn't, that
Fairmont.
North Highway 97 corridor project here in Bend was a House Bill 2017 project, for example. But yeah, there are some that are left over. So they promised, House Bill 2017, they promised too many shiny new capital construction projects. Leveraged us out the nose in terms of providing enough for basic operations and maintenance. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And that was ideally what the legislature would have fixed this session, but they did not. But I mean, it is really important for people to understand that a lot of the things that people are unhappy about stem back to House Bill 2017. We overextended ourselves, and that's a problem. But everything that we pushed forward this session was led by a concern over this operations and maintenance shortfall, which that need, to fix little cracks in the road so they don't turn into big holes, to plow snow, shouldn't be held hostage to people being unhappy about House Bill 2017.
But didn't we, as Deschutes County, get asked for coming up with another 5 million for the Terrebonne project that was from 2017? I mean, and didn't we say yes?
We put that on the table to keep it moving forward.
Yeah, we did. So we picked up our share.
I hope you don't mind that if I, jump in to this a little bit. Just put some slides together to kind of walk the board through, what we expect to see in a bill at that special session here at the end of the month, based on, bullets that have been out there. And I'm sorry, I don't know why it's not firing up from a slideshow perspective here. Let me try one last pitch effort. I don't know. You can read that. So the bill generate 650 per biennium in the state highway fund, and the proposal is 50-30-20. They're in the waning moments of the last session. That did not include 50-30-20, so it kind of aced out counties and cities. What's coming back now is almost that bill, but 50-30-20 added to that. So the counties and cities do get our traditional share of the state highway fund resources. The proposal would increase the gas tax by 6 cents a gallon, increase registration fees by $42 as a base, but then also an additional $30 for electric vehicles and anything getting more than 40 miles per gallon. Increased title fees by $139. That's the big swing here. The title fee increase. That's more than a traditional, typical type of increase that would be put forward. And we are working as counties to also include the small county allotment. It would basically take some of what the counties get at that 30% and redistribute it to some of the smaller counties, kind of taking care of our own little brother type scenario. Bill includes additional 0.1% payroll tax for the statewide transportation improvement fund. That's transit. So it would basically double that funding. And then there's language regarding a phased-in mandatory road usage charge for EVs and hybrid vehicles over time. When you distill all that down to actually what comes to counties and then Deschutes County, $97.5 million would come annually to counties. Deschutes County gets about 6% of that, which puts us at about 5.6 million annually. And that's about a 25% increase over the current funding that we have. That said, I did kind of roll back just through the CPI index. Inflation has gone up 27.3% since House Bill 2017. And then the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, which is how we measure costs more accurately specific to construction. That's been 30.2% since 2017. We'll go back a little bit further. Since 1993, which is the last time the federal gas tax was increased, the CPI has gone up 116%. The construction cost index been 171%, whereas the state gas tax has only gone up 67% across that. It's all the federal gas tax. So the conversation has always been about inflation and transportation funding. That's the overarching issue that if you had to put your finger on one thing, why we're in the position we're in, it's because we're not reacting to inflation. Some of the pitfalls and concerns of what's on the table right now is this funding package is stopgap. Definitely put together to address ODOT's funding need. And so it's not comprehensive. It doesn't include some of those big ticket project items, traditional projects that the legislature allocates resources for, to build stuff and make improvements. The package is not bipartisan, and Doug and I have had a lot of conversations about this and why that's a problem. And the legislature was, Bruce Starr, in the various Joint Transportation Committee meetings where he lost kind of his mojo was, hey, this has been bipartisan. It's always been bipartisan. It's not bipartisan. It didn't feel that way, at least to some of the folks in the minority group. And the issue is that, with the supermajorities, the ability to pass a funding measure exists without any bipartisan participation. But what that can do, as Doug would probably attest to, is is it does motivate the anti-tax crowd, the minority party to potentially refer this to the voters. Something that we don't see a lot of in transportation funding. That's what the legislature's job is. They're there to kind of do the dirty work and hopefully shield, some of that from happening and going to voters. Because if it does, there's a chance, very good chance, it's not going to survive a referral. This is a bipartisan matter. It kind of takes the minority party off the hook for the reality of the fact that they have that responsibility, to adjust these rates from time to time, to make sure that we get the resources we need to maintain the public's asset that the public's invested billions and billions and billions of dollars in over time. If this goes to referral, and if this is the way transportation funding kind of moves forward in the future, that's going to set us back decades. Think about, city councils everywhere adjusting water rates and sewer rates. Utility companies adjusting power rates. They need to do that in order to maintain the services that they have. They're able to do that through their powers of their legislative powers, rate setting, the PUC, guiding utility rates. Okay, that's the unfortunate dirty work of operating utilities. Transportation system is a utility, but the funding is highly political. As Doug kind of mentioned, there are many opportunities to provide wins in a bipartisan negotiation. At least they should be putting on the table to give that minority party something to hold on to here. I've listed 4 here. There's more than that. PLAs being the biggest one. I would prefer detaching the CARB rules, California Air Resources Board rules, which mandate battery powered semi trucks within a few years, and going back to EPA rules for emissions reductions. That's a very important, that would be a very helpful thing actually for the environment as well, because those EPA rules are pretty tough. ODOT staff back to office, pulling back on some of the offensive legislation that we tend to see. These are the things that could be put on the table. Next slide, the time to kind of dance around, and the tough conversation that we need to have in transportation funding is over. I think we need to start to have real conversations with our legislative delegation about what this means to us, because we can't, we're going to suffer through the politicization of transportation funding for a long, long time if we don't get it right. So in terms of the elevator conversations, conversations that you may have an opportunity to have with our delegates here in Deschutes County, I've kind of put some tough talking points together, again, because I think we've arrived at that point in the conversation where we have to kind of get over it a little bit. First one, for the majority party, you must convince a governor to negotiate with the minority party to achieve a bipartisan funding package. That's the pathway to success, near term and long term. If you illuminate the path to organize and refer a transportation funding package to the voters, this could set us back decades. If this is now the only way to get transportation funding in the state, and we can't ignore the potential of this risk. Okay, that this could happen. Counties are funded primarily with state highway fund dollars, and we have more road miles than ODOT, and we're equally dependent on the legislature to set that rate, that gas tax, that registration fee, as ODOT is. And so we're behind the scenes in this conversation here. And the politics of transportation funding have an unintended victim, and that's county road departments, right? That's where the conversation's been, but we're equally tied to that funding stream. Let's consider any funding package which does not honor that 50-30-20, which House Bill 3402 attempted to do, must be opposed, because that just aces out local government, and these things come along so infrequently. When will there be another opportunity, to again make up for the loss of inflation moving forward? And our local majority delegation was prepared to pass that. That's just a fact. Lastly, you must consider meaningful bipartisan oversight of ODOT and transportation in general. You can't show up to every 10 years and expect everybody to be on the same page. Kind of got to build that ownership and the need of the transportation system on a day-to-day basis. Not just, every 8 to 10 years. Of course, that's going to happen. You're going to run into opposition because there's no one there speaking, for one side. Minority party's not off the hook.
Not at all.
Without any built-in inflation hedge, like we have a property tax and income tax, things like that, the legislature has a responsibility to frequently adjust the fuel tax and other and exploring funding mechanisms. And what service and really the prior investment again that the public has made in their transportation system. Ignoring that this is a reality is truly malpractice. If you have an asset that you're sitting there and letting rot, and and you're not making the attempts, to actually fund what needs to be funded, it's only going to cost the public so much more in the long term, right? Again, counties are funded, same statement as was on the prior slide. We're the unintended victim here. Cost of not maintaining payment is exceptionally higher than maintaining payment. So, by not being able to do something, it may be saving the taxpayers in the very short term, but the long term, you're basically telling them you will have to pay more for this than if we did something today. The average cost increase with what's on the table right now is $6.44 per month per vehicle. That factors in, 13,000 miles a year, 25 miles a gallon, registration fee, and the new title fee if you replace your vehicle every 8 years, which is the average. So $6.44 per month per vehicle. Match that up against any utility increase that you've seen, this last year on your utility bill. Very competitive. And one thing that, to note is that states with sustainable funding have one thing in common. They have a major funding source in addition to gas tax and DMV fees. Utah lines up very well from a demographic, a size perspective, GDP, whatever you want to do it. We're very close to Utah in a variety of categories. They have fewer lane miles than Oregon, yet they provide 30% more funding through other mechanisms than we do here in Oregon. We focus on gas tax, we focus on DMV, and that's the only show we've got. But when they're doing it right and doing it well, they've diversified their funding source development. Yeah, I took over your presentation. I apologize.
You were so ready for it though. Huh?
It's,
Well, this is a
we're
good tool.
past the point.
Yeah.
Of not having these hard conversations with the people that make the decisions.
Next few weeks, we can advocate, use these as conversation points for anything you want to do to help this forward.
We need to be talking to all of our legislators. Points to both sides.
Yeah.
I will say that, I track this pretty closely with both my commissioner and IOTC hat on it. I saw a lot of people not showing up like grownups for this discussion. Use of grievances for political, for electoral politics, political gain, not policy. Senator Starr, I would not put among that group, but I just to provide a little insight, and particularly on the accountability issues, I want to share one of the discussions I had with Senator Starr. So again, he's not one of the ones who was political grandstanding for electoral gain for himself, but I went in and I talked with him, primarily first with my county commissioner hat on. And as the conversation progressed, you were talking about, the need for accountability measures. And I said to him, look, like I've been sitting on the Oregon Transportation Commission since October, not very long, but I have heard about all these audits. I've heard about all these concerns, and a bunch of this stuff was fixed, right? You know, we learned early on that we learned a long time ago that ODOT had problems with their accounting system. They were logging federal revenue coming in this year that wasn't supposed to come in for 2 or 3 years. Wasn't that the funding didn't exist? Wasn't that the funding had been lost? It was just they were showing it, you know, coming in this year when it wasn't due for a while, $1.1 billion, right? Accounting problem fixed, you know, the system was fixed. And so, you know, when I said to Senator Starr was, look, you know, I've come on the OTC very recently. I can't go back in time and fix these things in the past, but you know, moving forward, if you can tell me about specific accountability issues that need to be addressed, you know, I promise you, I will wear this hat and I will do everything I can to get those things fixed. And you know, we talked about that for a little while, and finally kind of got to the point where he said, you know, there are concerns about you know, past project cost overruns, you know, bad cost estimating, things like that. But the accountability stuff has largely been fixed, and that's part of the reason, you know, he didn't have anything specific to send me away with. You know, from that discussion, like this, just kind of like run his hands around that. And so, you know, this concern about accountability measures, people are using stuff that was identified as a problem a year, 2 years ago, to make political hay now. That had already been fixed. You know, that's why the accountability measures in this, you know, on all these bills, it's pretty short. It's pretty short and it's pretty light. You know, Chris and I have had a lot of discussions about, yeah, ODOT, their project estimate, their cost containment, their project delivery. There are definitely some opportunities for improvement in all of those systems. But this bill, we are not talking about big capital, new capital. We're talking about maintenance. And so I get it that, you know, it's one agency and people are upset about these new capital projects. I get it. But like, you can't hold the maintenance services of this agency that do a good job. You can't hold them hostage for this stuff. So that's, I mean, I hope that some of that comes through in this discussion.
There's a will, there's a way. All right, I'm out.
But is there a will though? That's the question.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, honestly, Commissioner Bowman, you're still paying like hardly anything for your electric car. Nothing has been done to those fees. And we've been for years. I mean, does that have to come from the legislature to have that increased? Like, really? And the fact that that was only 3% for maintenance from 2017, anybody that knew transportation knew that was totally not gonna cover anything. And then the fact that they wanna close the little, you know, like in Condon, like the little communities, instead of taking one from different offices down the I-5 corridor, let's just destroy the people that live in Condon and North. So, yeah, they're gonna be stuck.
If I can clarify a couple of things. The road user charge was in the transportation bills that were proposed. So the fix to, you know, EVs getting away with not paying their fair share, it's been in there. The legislature just needs to pass it. And
Well, it
then
should have been in there like 3 years ago, so.
there wasn't a transportation package to use.
Well, there
There hasn't been a
maybe there should have
transportation
been one, you know,
Sure.
we shouldn't have been,
Yeah.
why wait 9 years, 8 years to do something? Yeah, it's really, and you're talking about that inflation number, oh my gosh, yeah, it's huge.
Perfect. And all the more reason to get something done this year. And then some clarification on the closures of service facilities, the substantial layoffs that we're seeing in regions 4 and 5 of ODOT, east of the Cascades. As discussed, House Bill 2017 short shrifted operations and maintenance. And so where are we having a funding crisis for operations and maintenance services and staffing? Which offices are heavier on operations and maintenance staff than others? Regions 4 and 5. So proportionally speaking, they are going to have to lay off more of their employees than any of the other regions within ODOT because of the heavy dependence of those offices on operations and maintenance revenue. So you want to help Eastern Oregon? We need to pass a package that brings operations and maintenance funding up to a reasonable level. We would, I guess the other way of saying that is, Oregon east of the Cascades would disproportionately benefit from new operations and maintenance funding that comes online.
Switching topics,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang, are you engaged in water also? I'm just joking around. I know, here we go, next topic.
Yeah, big issue which we talked about quite a bit during the session, including the commission, was water. There were two major bills that came out of the governor's office. Both went into a negotiation process, and one emerged and the other didn't. The one that emerged was Senate Bill 1154, which will have some impact on South County, and we'll have to watch how it is implemented and what the opportunities are or challenges are. But Senate Bill 1154 did pass. The other was Senate Bill 1153, which was implementing a number of new measures and approval regulations and opportunity for groups to get involved and issue public comment on very simple transfers of water rights or even location of water. So for instance, if a city decided to move their pump station 800 feet, they would immediately have triggered all of these new opportunities for public comment and engagement, rather than a pass that being kind of a technical move. 1153 did not pass, although they did take out at the end of the day the cities and the counties from the bill. There were still enough concerns that led to that bill failing. So 1154 passed, 1153 died. Note that COCO was proposing an extension of the mitigation conservation statute as is, but through 2035. That did not get approved, but COCO is meeting with the Warm Springs in September, October to have conversations about that. We're hoping we can reach agreement on that. And then there was no money in the bill, which came out of a House bill for water conservation efforts. So lots more to talk about water, but those are the highlights.
So for 1154, yeah, we'll kind of digest it as an organization, Deschutes County proper, groundwater protection.
Yep.
Southern Deschutes County, we have a long history of wanting to protect the good water that's there, knowing that action needs to happen sometime. So if this is the right tool, it would be interesting to learn about it.
Yep. So I would suggest as we move through rulemaking, we watch the department engaging in this, we should be very involved. Keep an eye on it.
And it presents a real opportunity for us.
Yes. Yep.
Particularly this new category of groundwater areas of concern that emphasize voluntary action and incentives to fix problems before we reach the point where a groundwater management area is declared, which means that your water is so contaminated that it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah.
One other I would add to your list, and we should all know that the water bank legislation passed
Yes,
on this session.
that's right.
Didn't see that on your
Yeah,
list, but
not here. I think this is elsewhere, but that's also, should have put it on the slide. The opportunity to kind of continue a concept that was piloted here and expand it, improve upon it. All the parties at the table, including the districts and the ag folks and the cities and the DRC, et cetera. So it's a good tool for us. Just really quickly on workforce and contracting, these were two big, very controversial issues. One was Senate Bill 916. This was the big unemployment insurance bill that we all heard quite a bit about. At the end of the day, it did pass narrowly, but it did pass. It was the priority of SEIU and AFSCME and the unions. It allows public employees to collect unemployment insurance from the currently capitalized privately capitalized unemployment insurance trust fund. But the one change that was made before final passage was reducing the number of eligible weeks from 26 to 10. So that passed. One that has to go through rulemaking that I think all municipalities will have to keep an eye is House Bill 2688, which is expands the definition of public works to require prevailing wage on bespoke products that you're acquiring from outside contracts or sources. And the definition of bespoke and what this covers is going to have to be determined in accordance with ORS. So this will be something that is ripe for more clear definitions, but will certainly have an impact or could have an impact on costs or procedures for cities and counties. I won't go into all the housing bills, lots passed on the housing, but you can take a look. One of the things I'll point out is that a bill to extend the opportunity for local improvement districts to be formed in areas adjacent to UGBs, but outside the UGBs was passed on Senate Bill 967. Cities, of course, within UGBs go to property owners and try to put together LIDs. It has to be approved by the majority of the property owners. This has been used extensively inside the UGBs. Now it's an opportunity for property owners in county areas to work with their taxing bodies to see if they want to put together an LID, especially in areas which might be annexed into the city at some future point. So this will go through rulemaking as well, but that passed. I'm through House Bill 3145 on here. It's an issue that I worked on a little bit, but extending existing LIP funding towards modular housing, which studies have shown, and other examples in other states have shown, is less expensive than stick-built housing. It also takes advantage of some really innovative construction contractors in the timber industry work in modular housing. Might be a really good opportunity to bring affordable housing into areas. And we can go through the rest of this. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but housing is a big issue. Transient lodging tax, which we of course talked a lot about, and you had a work session on it, got some great input from the local stakeholders here. A bill advanced, got halfway through the process and didn't end up passing, but it would have changed the formula from 30/70 to 60/40. Did not pass, but it's the furthest that a transient lodging tax reform bill has gotten ever. So expect this to come back. Representative Jules Walters was the chief sponsor of that. I expect to see that. And then two bills that that you heard about a lot and our staff worked on, including House Bill 2089, which is the property tax foreclosure bill, which we provided some very detailed comments on, and thank you to the staff for engaging and helping with that. A lot of that did go into the final version. The final version I don't think is perfect from the county's perspectives, but it moved a lot further away from the original bill that came out, which didn't reflect any of the comments that we submitted. So, and then there will be a ballot measure 5 and 50 task force. So I will keep you posted on schedules of that, but I think that's something we'll want to track. Behavioral health, I think that I'm going to have some help up here to talk about some of these things, and I won't go into great detail, but this was a big issue. We had some failures and some successes. Impacts did get funded at an additional $10 million. The process for evaluating grant applications through House Bill 3069 was streamlined with a lot of input from this county. We had staff and the commissioner spent time with Chair Krupp. A lot of those comments were reflected in the final bill in House Bill 3069. And then I think most importantly from an impact standpoint, that additional $10 million factors into what is now current services level. So that'll be the baseline from which we'll build. So that's a significant step. So other issues you can take a look at, there are again some pots of money. I mentioned House Bill 2059, which is the residential for adults and also some money for kids. There's lots of money in a variety of bills, but a lot of things failed. A lot of the kind of innovative bills developed during the interim did not make it through the process, especially on workforce issues. So individually, staff will go through these. I don't know if anyone wants to come up with comments.
Somebody ready to share?
Holly couldn't be here today, but I know there's staff support, so if you just want to come up and talk to her.
You want to highlight?
As I say, this, what did you guys see during the legislative session that we want to advocate for? I mean, it looks like you're ready. That's why I'm trying to invite you.
Yeah.
Come on up.
Impacts. For us, what this meant the crisis program is that the funding will be like more consistently a part of the CJC budget, which was good news for us, as well as we were granted an additional here, 397,000 through December 31st of this year, which brought our budget up to a little over 6 million that we've received from the CJC so far on impacts grant. With our funding shifting and losing some, that was really helpful to sustain staffing for our after hours.
And did that come specifically out of the budget allocation for this biennium that we just started, or was that leftover money from last biennium, or?
They granted us additional money, so all impacts grantees got no cost extensions, but upon the grant committee's review, they give us that to sustain staffing.
But you're not sure where that money is coming
I think that came from the additional 10 million.
from. Part of
It's
it,
fun.
Okay.
part of that 10.
Cleared the path for a more
Right.
stable future.
Right.
Or maybe to cover you until you have a chance to apply and be awarded for this,
To
the rest
continue
of
to
the
apply.
biennium. Okay.
So all those funds were effective July 1st of 2025, in spite of the fact the governor had not yet signed the bill. I think she signed the bill.
I think she
Last
has,
week, yeah.
yes.
She's slow walking her signature of variety of bills.
And, in the past, there's been discussion about the impacts grant, kind of having different, flavors each biennium. Is it now very much more attached to crisis services, or could there be a whole new emphasis area for impacts in the future that, that takes it away from crisis services?
I think that depends on how they continue to review those applications through the CJC now that it's a part of board approval. However, we have continued to focus our efforts solely on crisis, and that continues to.
I think that was one of the main changes in 3069 is going from these 11 review committees down to one review committee. And the effort, I think, is to be a little more consistent. So a bigger pot of money and counties would apply for whatever mix of services fit what they're trying to do to be effective. Different counties in different areas of the state have different needs and preferences.
Yeah, and they continue to try and look at it that way as like, what does Deschutes County need versus Warm Springs and whoever else is applying for impacts. Also, as a part of impacts is deflection, which is separate here in Deschutes County, but some people are running polls out of their own counties. But those are all being overseen by one sector of that program now, whereas the other half is focused on public safety and law enforcement grant review. So they can look a little bit more closely at what funding is going where under different grant reviews is like deflection versus impacts.
So lots of bills on this, stay here just in case something else comes up. Won't mention any of these, but you can take a look at
I
it.
mean, I'd
That's,
like to say that the administrative burden issue, talk about things that could actually be really beneficial for us, but are, kind of pushing the limits of innovation and not status quo. I think that's something that, I just want to flag right now as a topic that I think we should be focusing on in future legislative sessions.
Yeah, I think that was certainly a topic that came up time and time again, going from 11 different processes with 11 different, sets of perspectives to one application with one set of perspectives. The hope is to streamline that and make that a little more efficient for counties. I think the final version of the bill, as we said, did incorporate quite a few of the suggestions that we had made during that process.
You're still talking about impacts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about the House Bill 20.
Oh, 2022,
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
the administrative burden issue is really,
agree 100%.
Well, the interesting thing was that they did fund IDD, additional 30%. So that, who actually came through on that? We were just looking at something last week. I mean, who was their advocate?
Well, on the Ways and Means Committee and the Subcommittee on Human Services is Senator Sarah Gelser from Corvallis, who is a very strong advocate for IDD services. Has some personal experience with her son who experienced went through that system. So I guarantee that she was probably one of the big advocates as well as AOC and others as well.
Paul Partridge should be online if I wanted to ask him a question about IDD.
Oh,
There's their IDD and program manager.
hi, Paul.
Yeah, was there a specific question, Commissioner?
No, I just remember seeing you in Klamath Falls testifying with me.
Yeah.
And, you were successful.
Well, yeah, we do consider, I mean, that 30.4% increase is really current service level, not really more because it takes into account caseload growth over a biennium. So it really kept us fairly flat. We still didn't get the 100% funding to the workload model that's indicated, but yeah, we did consider it a success given the budget forecast.
Yeah, I mean, and also in terms of legislators who are involved, I made a visit to Representative Valderrama at some point, the one of the two co-chairs of Health and Human Services Ways and Means, to just talk about a lot of this stuff. And that subcommittee was moving things forward as a bundle. I mean, there was a whole package and it included many of these things that, ultimately did get funded. And, really appreciated. It was one of the governor's priorities. It was clearly a priority for the Health and Human Services Ways and Means Committee. And we got some good things. Didn't get everything. One other piece of this that I'd like to ask about is these residential treatment dollars under House Bill 2059. I mean, what do we need to know in order to be pursuing those funds for our region, kind of moving forward?
Commissioner, that's an excellent question and one that I posed to OHA this week. And their response was, stay tuned and we'll get back to you. So I put down a marker that we wanted to track that and be aware of that. I think that as that's $65 million just the adult systems. We need to be very aware of it. There were a ton of individual requests for behavioral health housing and behavioral health housing supports funding. And every region had a few, which is why, if you go back to my first slide, the fact that we got $3 million for our residential children's psychiatric facility was so impressive because they didn't do a lot of that. So so it was impressive that we got that. But as far as the overall pots of money, OHA will have to come up with a formula and a process. And my guess is that will take several months. But I've asked that we be kept in the loop. And I think staff is probably, and AOC has also made that request. So that's something we'll need to track very carefully. So we're on top of that.
And behavioral health is tracking this.
Yes. My slide on what was missed out on here, forgot to put it in, but what we missed out on was community corrections. You all know that, so I told you about it. You already know that we got 0% of the cost study, which means that once again, the legislatures decided that they are not going to be counties for services that they are mandated to require on the agreement that we have made with them. And I was on a call earlier this week with all the AOC and county advocates, and it's a significant concern. As you well know, counties are going to be forced to lay off the individuals who provide really what are cost-saving measures, those wraparound services and connection to services for those leaving incarceration, save money. That it's one of these head-scratching decisions this session that I simply cannot understand why you would not invest in things that save money and therefore drive up costs and increase recidivism. I mean, to me, that decision makes no sense. But it was not current service levels. It was not status quo. Status quo is let's underfund community corrections. I think that's a terrible mistake, and I think that's something that counties as a whole will be pushing. But on the top 5 of things that I think they really blew, I think they really blew it on that decision. And so whether or not the E-Board, which has kept a lot of money back, they've held a lot of money back, or whether the next February they can correct that. But already counties are announcing layoffs as you well know. So that's a significant. So, I know I'm over time, so let me just thank you. Wildfire we talked about, here's the oral nicotine tax 3940 that we mentioned, raised to $60 million biennium. That was the only tobacco product that had not been taxed, so I said, we'll tax that. Mentioned that our ADU housing bill, which went through up and back and forth, and got held hostage for some period of time, Senate Bill 75 passed, so no problem moving forward with rural ADUs. And then real quickly,
Doug, if I could just
Yeah.
add, number one, tracking HB 3940, you're just flagging for staff that there's some really exciting new community resiliency funding opportunities that I hope that we're gonna be very much on top of and figuring out how to position our community to get as much of that money as we can. And then I also wanted to say that one of the bills that passed this session was Senate Bill 85, which sets up it sets up the ODF, Oregon State Fire Marshal, or whatever DCBS stands for, the business services that the insurance commissioner for the state, to work actively work with the insurance industry, and that is to try to address the contraction of coverage, the increases of premiums, and just kind of the dysfunctional way that the insurance industry is engaging with wildfire risk in our state. And I hope that we can be engaged in that process in a meaningful way as well, because done right, there are opportunities to make the insurance industry an ally in helping us push people to make their homes as resilient as possible, and then give them credit for it in their premiums. So I don't know exactly. That would be another one I'd be very curious to hear, kind of like, how does that play out? Where are opportunities to be engaged in the process? This, besides Southwestern Oregon, this is kind of ground zero for these insurance issues, and we should be at the table.
Yep, I think that's a good point, and a bill that did get through ahead of 83, so it kind of got lost in the hullabaloo about Senate Bill 83 being held hostage. So good point. I won't go through the to-do lists because I think all the things that I recommend and that you're already doing, but I would say keep it going. I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think the involvement of the commissioners, staying in touch with the legislators is really key. Texting them, visiting them when you're over in the building, that's fantastic. Staff has been great. I want to thank Nick and Jen for really being super helpful this session, and I have to thank Corey, who works with me, and Emma, who was with us this session, for being great. There will be a short session, depending on the revenue forecast. The Ways and Means Co-Chairs are warning us there might be other special sessions needed to cut funding or to reallocate funding. They held back, as I mentioned, about $500 million in general fund and carryover money. They also held back a record percentage of bonding authority. The Capital Construction Subcommittee co-chair told me this week he expects that they will allocate some of that in February. So there is an opportunity there, and we have to wait and see what the feds do. The feds, obviously, their decision will affect us. So
Can you give a real quick timeline on the short session of when we should start preparing and ramping up? I think we discussed internally the dates and the legislative concepts and bills is pushed back further this year, so it might not come as quickly.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you could just give a quick update on that timeline.
Yeah, so short session will be in February. It'll be a 35-day session. So I don't know what the start date will be. I think one of the good things they did this year is start the session in January. So they got out about a week and a half earlier than typical. I would love them to get out before school ended, so people could actually go to their kids' graduations and take vacations without having to worry about that. So if they started it in mid, and it doesn't matter really so much for a short session. So as far as the deadlines go, bill draft, first of all, bills are limited in a short session. So they're limited to 2 bills for House members and 2 bills for Senate members. As you recall, there were 2 members who had well over 200 bills. Senator David Rock-Smith had 240, 250 bills, and Representative Paul Evans had well over 300 bills, one of which was the Spartacus bill that included Core 3. That was good. And he wants to come over and visit Core 3, by the way, so we'll probably see Representative Evans over here at some point. But the deadline for filing those 2 bills is going to be in November, I think November 21st. So we have some time. However, and Jen, this week we're talking about, legislators probably each had a bill or 2 that didn't get passed, since a lot of bills didn't pass. So my guess is most legislators already know what their 2 concepts are going to be. So if we have a concept for a policy bill, let's hear it pretty soon, because we'll need to go to our delegation and ask them if they're willing.
Because there'll be a whole menu of items that people are gonna wanna pick from that didn't get done.
Didn't get passed, right? Because so much did not pass, right?
Yeah.
A record number did not, record percent did not pass.
So
Well, the
we-
fact that we're gonna be number 50 in the nation for pharmacies, I believe in September. Is there any way that can be addressed in this short session, or is that going to have to be like someone from Condon's bill?
Well, I will tell you, I just met with Representative Rob Notes, who had a work group on pharmaceutical issues and PBMs during the interim, and he tried desperately to get a bill over the threshold this session and did not. He told me this week that that's an issue that he will continue to work on. We have a lot of small town pharmacies closing. Part of that is state regulations, and
I
part
mean,
of
we
it
have
is
pharmacies closing at
consolidation.
that,
Yeah, that's right.
they're closing all over.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. So
So if we scheduled like a board work session in early-ish September, is that giving enough room, or are we looking to start getting those concepts earlier to our delegation?
I think if there are concepts that we want to talk about early September, early to mid-September is fine. I mean, our legislators, I think, are hopefully taking a little time off after working feverishly to get their end of session reports out.
And gearing up for their special
Gearing up for the
session.
special session, right? So, yeah.
I know some of the Central
want it.
Oregon legislatures are already doing a town hall type event, so they're, that's
Yes.
more of a wrap up, but, okay, so we'll coordinate internally and look to get a work session on the books for the board to kind of start talking about those concepts, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great.
And just, I'll mention resources. This is something that hasn't happened in the past, but the Legislative Policy and Research Office has done bill summaries. It's on OLS. You can look them up on OLS for each critical area, all the bills that passed and failed. This is super helpful. And then AOC came out with their legislative report this past week. I think it's 219 pages long. So it's top to bottom. It's scintillating weekend reading, evening reading. But as I mentioned, I didn't have time to touch on all the bills that we worked on, but there's a lot that took place in session. And if you have a question about individual bills, we're always happy to answer. Sorry to take so long.
Oh, not a problem, we got very engaged.
There was lots to talk about, there's more to come. I mean, one thing I do wanna flag, that I'm interested in having us work on, between now and the next long session, is that transient lodging tax, discussion. I think that, as you said, Doug, it's gonna come back. We're an important county in that discussion, an important tourism destination. I got the impression that some of the fiercest legislative advocacy against was spearheaded by Sherry Hamilton. So, if there's local discussions we should be having to kind of, try to tee that up, let's start early.
Well, what's your position? What are you thinking? Because we were talking about maybe for future dollars, that changing the percentage. And they were talking about changing it from 70-30 to 60-40 for existing dollars.
Yeah. No, I mean, the fact that they tried that and they couldn't get it across the finish line suggests to me that maybe something a little less ambitious, like just for new increments of tax, might be, might be a more reasonable approach and might be something that they could actually get past, which would work very well for us.
Yeah, I'm just making sure you weren't going down different paths. So that's what we talked about before. Yeah.
Great.
All right, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thanks. Five, item number 2 is going to be application for a BLM and OWEB grant. Kevin and Lauren, thank you for standing by.
I know that room clear out.
Why is everybody leaving? Yeah.
Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. For the record, I am Kevin Moyer, County Forester.
I'm Lauren Street, Natural Resources Specialist for the county.
And we are here today to ask approval for some applications submitted for the BLM OWEB Good Neighbor Authority Grant Program and the BLM Community Fire Assistance Program, and further authorize the county administrator to accept such grants if awarded. And so these were a couple grants that came through our department, what was it, late spring, early summer, pretty quick turnarounds. We didn't have too much time to apply for them, so we did apply with the nature that it's very similar work that we usually apply for, and then we are here today to ask for approval for those grants. The two grants are basically, the first grant is as a sub award through OWEB. It's actually BLM funding. It's been allocated to OWEB, and then OWEB was looking for projects, and that's how it came up. And there's a lot of flexibility with that grant. Really, the primary purpose of the grant is to improve water health in some of the watersheds in local areas. And so we could what we have proposed to use it in similar fashion that we do a lot of our grants, where we could create individual projects for communities that we could award. And then we would also probably use a little bit of it for treating county properties too, because we always got to make sure we're maintaining our county properties. That grant that we applied for was $275,000, with $225,000 going towards community projects and $50,000 going towards treating county property. The second grant.
Question on that first one, is there specific projects that are kind of on the shelf that this would fit, or is that just a follow-on?
We don't necessarily have shelf stock for it. We would do something probably similar to how we went forth with the BLM Community Assistance Grant, where we create an application process, allow communities to apply, and then see what projects come up, and then issue some awards with it. We do have some flexibility. It doesn't have to be necessarily focused towards fire fuel reduction, but the underlying goal would to be improved watershed health. So, and then go ahead.
And so for that, I mean, they probably, to the extent that you want to do like vegetation treatments with that funding, probably, if they're smart, they would be looking at which lands actually have significant impacts on streams. And if we don't, as we've discussed many times with Juniper, in Deschutes County, there's not that much area. I mean, there's the amount of area that has really significant influence on a White Juice Creek or Tumble Creek is very small. So I mean, did you discuss that at all in your application, that you'd be kind of like looking for those places that?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily to increase overland flow or to increase water flow. It was really just to improve the health of watersheds in general. So you could potentially have upland treatments that aren't even designated or adjacent to a watershed, but because you're reducing the destruction you might get from wildfire, you would inevitably improve that watershed health. So there would be indirect impacts to that. And so that's why there was so much flexibility. It wasn't a direct directly where you would have to improve flow or improve that specific watershed in general. We were given quite a bit of flexibility with it. We wrote it very similar to the way we write our other projects. So we're really focused more on just fuels management type treatments.
Okay, well, I just know that OWEB is, you know, when people float Juniper projects towards them and, you know, argue a watershed benefit, they're pretty sophisticated at looking at the watershed in the specific areas that would have the most benefit for, you know, a river or stream.
Yeah. The second grant is the BLM Community Fire Assistance Grant, which is actually a grant that we've been awarded. We were awarded not this year, but the last 2 years, and we have reapplied for basically a new proposal. It would be very similar to the work we did before. We asked for $480,000 with $40,000 going towards indirect costs. 40,000, well, actually, I think 40,000 we offered up as match. The whole project was 480,000. 40,000 would go in as match, just to provide some match to the project. 40,000 would go as an indirect. And then most of it, I believe, would go towards community projects as well. 300,000 would go towards community projects, and then the remaining 100,000 would go towards treating county properties to just maintain all the properties we have.
So when will we know if we get that grant or not, since you've already applied?
It sounds like it would be the new federal fiscal year is when they would announce the awards. So October is what we would find out.
Okay, so if we do get it, then can we get that funding out before calendar year end?
It'd be pretty challenging to get it out before calendar year end because we would have to come up with an agreement, and then we'd also have to come up with an application process, and then
We don't have templates from before?
we have templates before, but the agreement, we would have to go through the agreement itself and then actually have an application process where people would need to apply. That alone might be roughly 3 months just to accomplish that. And then we're not actually giving out funding. We would be giving out basically utilizing contractors to do the work for their project. So it'd basically be an award, but it wouldn't be a cash award.
We'd have to do
services
more,
award.
then we'd have to do more contracting to get contractors.
Yeah, and then
lined
set up
up to do-
contractors. Yeah, we could get some projects on the
But is
ground.
this 300,000 being spent on private land then? Next to the BLM, so like Mackenzie Canyon, close to where I live, could those people put in
Yeah.
to be one of the
Yeah, they could apply.
awardees?
They could apply for it, yeah. Yeah, and then I will say that that award, the BLM Community Assistance Grant Award, they are only prioritizing 500,000 in Oregon for that award. And that's for the entire state. And we asked for 480,000. So there's a little bit of uncertainty with whether we'd receive that award. The way that award was received in years past is that we received the first year of the award. So we have to basically designate how much money we would ask for 3 consecutive years. We received the award for the first year, and then we received a modification for the award the second year. Unfortunately, we did not receive a modification for the award the third year. So even though we had an agreement with this in years past to do this, we never fully were funded the award that we were supposedly supposed to receive. So I think it's going to be a year by year allocation if we actually receive that award. And then I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, commissioners, did you have any more comments, questions, concerns?
It's good to hear, kind of a vision about what we could do with these dollars, and obviously the OWEB efforts there could be beneficial to the community. I was thinking the Bridge Creek, any work that can be done in the watershed is going to be valuable there.
That's not private land or county land.
Just the example of the work that could be done. Is there a motion?
move approval of the application submitted for the BLM OWEB Good Neighbor Authority Grant Program and the BLM Community Fire Assistance Program. And further authorize the county administrator to accept such grants if it would.
And my question, the one grant is, if we actually get the 480,000, do you have the authority then to accept that without going through us?
Board approves. That's the
Yes.
vehicle now.
I mean, I know that we had BLM money a couple years ago that got, I don't know, left out on the table or something, so I'll second the motion, but I would just love to make sure that this actually happens.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes,
and Chair will vote yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Good night.
At this time, other items, we do have executive session today, two of them. Anything else? We had our meeting last Tuesday, and unfair, a little bit of weather out there. Sheriff was able to join us for that county breakfast, but also the next morning at that group breakfast, so he was able to get out and about a little bit. Practice being the sheriff, so that was good to see. Yeah, what else is coming up? So, I'm gonna attend the audit committee meeting on Friday, just to be in attendance, get a feel for what's going on, so that can be published for multiple commissioners in attendance. It's still a public meeting, just for it to be published. And then North Point Vista groundbreaking, so that's tomorrow. That'll be up in Redmond. Many years coming on that one.
yes, let me tell you the story. Okay,
And then Housing Works College View Apartments, we're gonna have our board meeting on Monday, or on Wednesday at 9, but we will make sure to get that Housing Works apartment. That's ribbon cutting, right, on Wednesday.
Move it. The one other thing I'll share is the consortium of MPOs for the state of Oregon met on Friday, and there was a lot of discussion about MPO concerns across the state about the transportation funding package. Works for, parts of it work for them because many of those MPOs are interested in public transit. And then other parts, there were people who were very interested in also seeing, things like great streets and safe routes to schools programs funded that were left out of this little mini package that is being worked on for the special session.
Okay, we'll see, nothing else, we'll go to an executive session.
Chute County Board of Commissioners will now convene an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.6602D and 2H, which allows the board to meet in order to discuss labor negotiations and litigation. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting an executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made, and at the conclusion, we will open the doors and invite the audience back into the room.
Okay, so we'll go to executive session and we will be back. So we're back from an executive session on a few items, but one of them is a settlement document regarding national opioid litigation with Purdue, Sackler, and a group of 8 of the terminology used in this settlements. So there's a letter to be signed, it's proposed to be signed, just acknowledging the settlements and receiving the funds. Is there a motion?
so moved.
Do we need to give the document?
Yeah, go ahead.
Move board signature of document number 2025-824, letter of authority to agree to settlements.
Second.
There we go. It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing that, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner Adair?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Thank you very much. Anything else for this meeting? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.